The cold, sterile air of Aura restaurant felt like a different world. It clung to the skin, smelling of lemon polish, expensive perfume, and the faint metallic scent of money. For Ilara Vance, stepping through the staff entrance was like crossing a border into a country where she didn't speak the language. She smoothed down the front of her worn grey t-shirt, a soft, threadbare thing that had seen better days. Her jeans were faded at the knees, and her sturdy work boots, though clean, were scuffed and scarred from countless hours spent on her feet. She'd come straight from the dog shelter, where she volunteered 3 mornings a week. The scent of sawdust and gentle animal companionship still lingered faintly on her clothes, a stark contrast to the oppressive perfection of Aura. This was her first day, a trial shift as a waitress in what was arguably the city's most exclusive dining establishment. "You must be the new girl." A voice, sharp and brittle as spun sugar, cut through the relative quiet of the prep kitchen. A man stood before her, his suit so sharply tailored it looked like it could draw blood. His hair was a perfect lacquered helmet of dark brown, and his eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept over Ilara's attire with undisguised contempt. This had to be him. Julian Croft, the owner. "Ilara Vance, yes sir, I'm here for my trial shift," she said, her voice steady. Julian's lip curled into a sneer. "Vance. Right. Well, Ilara Vance, let's get one thing straight. This is Aura. We don't cater to the brunch crowd or tourists looking for a cheap thrill. We cater to titans of industry, to old money, to people who understand that image is everything. Look at you." He gestured dismissively with a perfectly manicured hand. "You look like you've just crawled out of a barn." Ilara's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I apologize, Mr. Croft. My car had some trouble, and I didn't have time to change. It won't happen again." It was a lie, but a necessary one. "See that it doesn't," he snapped. "Your work ethic had better be leagues above your fashion sense." Maria. A woman in her late 50s, her face kind but etched with the fine lines of fatigue, hurried over. She wore the standard Aura uniform, a severe black dress that looked both expensive and uncomfortable. "Yes, Mr. Croft? This is Ilara. Show her the ropes, and for God's sake, find her a uniform that fits. I don't want her scaring off the clientele before the appetizers are even served." He turned on his heel and strode away, his expensive leather shoes clicking authoritatively on the tiled floor. Maria gave Ilara a sympathetic smile. "Don't mind him," she whispered, her voice warm. "His bark is worse than his bite. Most of the time. Come on, love, let's get you sorted." Maria led her to a small, cramped locker room and handed her a stiffly starched uniform. As Ilara changed, Maria explained the basics. The table numbering system that made no logical sense, the specific way the silverware had to be aligned to the millimeter, the unwritten rule about never making direct eye contact with certain regular patrons unless they addressed you first. "The most important thing," Maria said, her voice dropping lower, "is Mr. Croft's obsession with perfection. A single fingerprint on a wine glass, a crumb left on a chair, he sees everything. He's been on edge for weeks. There's a big deal he's trying to close, some investment firm buying the restaurant. He thinks it's his ticket to the big leagues." Ilara filed that piece of information away. "An investment firm? Vance Holdings, I think he said. Sounds fancy. He's been trying to get them to sign for months. Thinks $1 million deal is on the line. So everything has to be flawless, especially tonight. We have a reservation for a Mr. Sterling. He's a food critic for the Global Tribune. A good review from him could seal the deal for Julian." Ilara's expression remained placid, but inside a cold, hard knot formed in her stomach. Vance Holdings. Her Vance Holdings. This was precisely why she was here. Her company didn't just buy businesses, they vetted the people who ran them. Her grandfather had taught her that you could learn more about a man by watching him for a week than you could from a year's worth of financial statements. So she'd created a new identity, submitted an application, and decided to conduct the final stage of due diligence herself. Dressed in the restrictive uniform, her comfortable boots swapped for painful regulation black flats, Ilara felt like she was wearing a costume. She spent the next few hours shadowing Maria, learning the intricate dance of service at Aura. She was a quick study, She memorized the wine list, mastered the art of crumbing a table with a silver tool, and navigated the dining room with a quiet efficiency that even drew a grudging nod from the head waiter. She saw Julian Croft prowling the floor like a caged panther, his eyes darting everywhere. He would stop to adjust a flower in a vase by a fraction of an inch. He'd berate a busboy for the speed at which he refilled a water glass. He was a man obsessed not with hospitality, but with the performance of it. Late in the evening, Maria stumbled near the kitchen door, a tray of empty champagne flutes rattling precariously. Ilara, seeing it happen, moved with a speed that surprised them both, her hand shooting out to steady the tray before a single glass could fall. "Thank you, love," Maria breathed, clutching her chest. "My feet aren't what they used to be." "Don't mention it," Ilara said with a small smile. But Julian had seen. He stormed over, his face a mask of thunder. "What is this? A circus act? Maria, if you can't carry a simple tray, perhaps it's time you retired. And you," he jabbed a finger at Ilara, "stop trying to be a hero and start focusing on table 17. They've been waiting for their check for at least a minute." He didn't thank her for saving the expensive crystal. He didn't show a shred of concern for Maria. He only saw a flaw in his perfect polished machine. As he walked away, Ilara met Maria's weary eyes. The older woman gave a tiny, defeated shake of her head. It was in that moment that Ilara knew. The financial reports had told a story of a business barely staying afloat, propped up by loans and a reputation it no longer deserved. But this was the truth. This was the rot at the core of Aura, and it was far worse than any balance sheet could ever show. Her decision was hardening with every passing second, solidifying from a possibility into a certainty. Julian Croft was not a man Vance Holdings would ever do business with. But he didn't know that yet. He still had a performance to finish. The second day was a descent into a colder, more personal hell. Julian Croft had decided that Ilara was his personal project, a piece of uncut stone he could either polish into a diamond or discard among the gravel. From the moment she arrived, this time in a simple but clean blouse and dark slacks she'd bought from a thrift store, his eyes were on her. "Better," he conceded, his voice dripping with condescension as he surveyed her outfit in the pre-shift briefing. "At least you don't look like you're about to ask our patrons for spare change, but the real test is on the floor. Don't disappoint me." The disappointment, it seemed, was inevitable in his eyes. Every move she made was subject to his withering scrutiny. He corrected the way she held a bottle of wine, claiming her thumb was a centimeter too high on the neck. He materialized behind her as she was taking an order, hissing in her ear that her posture was unbefitting and that she should stand up straight, not slouch like a common street urchin. Ilara absorbed each insult with a chilling placidity. Inside, she was a meticulous archivist of his cruelty, cataloguing every slight, every demeaning word. Each barb was another nail in the coffin of his $1,000,000 deal. She was no longer just vetting him, she was gathering evidence for a verdict she had already reached. The other staff members gave her a wide berth. They had seen this before. Julian would fixate on a new employee, breaking them down until they either quit in tears or became a nervous, twitching wreck, incapable of performing their duties. They offered Ilara fleeting, pitying glances when they thought he wasn't looking, but no one dared to intervene. Fear was the primary seasoning in Aura's kitchen. Maria, however, sought her out in the brief lulls between services. "He's testing you," she said, her hands busy polishing silverware with a frantic energy. "He wants to see if you'll break. Don't let him have the satisfaction." "He doesn't bother me," Ilara replied truthfully, her voice low and even. Maria looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. She saw past the cheap clothes and the feigned nervousness. She saw a stillness in Ilara's eyes, a depth that was unnerving. It wasn't the look of a cowed young woman trying to earn a paycheck. It was the look of a predator patiently watching its prey. "You're different," Maria murmured, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Be careful, child." The evening's service was a masterclass in psychological torment. Julian assigned Ilara to the most difficult table in the restaurant, a party of 6 loud, obnoxious hedge fund managers who treated her like a piece of furniture. They snapped their fingers for her attention, changed their orders multiple times, and made lewd comments just loud enough for her to hear. Through it all, Ilara maintained a flawless composure, her service impeccable, her smile never wavering. She was the model of professional grace. This, perversely, seemed to infuriate Julian even more. Her refusal to crack, her quiet competence, was an affront to his power. He needed to see her crumble. The opportunity he was looking for came near the end of the night. The critic, Mr. Sterling, was seated at his customary corner table, a small, unassuming man who observed everything. Julian was hovering near the bar, watching Sterling's every move, his entire future hanging on the nib of that man's pen. Ilara was carrying a tray with a single exquisite dessert for another table, a delicate spun sugar dome over a raspberry mousse. As she passed a service station, a busboy, panicked by Julian's looming presence, darted out unexpectedly. Ilara sidestepped him with fluid grace, but the sudden movement caused the tray to tilt. The sugar dome, a masterpiece of confectionery art, slid and cracked against the silver rim. It was a tiny imperfection, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. But Julian's eye was trained. He saw it from across the room. It was the excuse he'd been waiting for. He moved with terrifying speed, his face contorted in a mask of theatrical rage. He intercepted her in the middle of the dining room, his voice a low, venomous hiss that nonetheless carried in the hushed atmosphere. "What is this?" he seethed, pointing a trembling finger at the cracked dome. "Is this a joke to you?" "A busboy bumped into me, Mr. Croft. I can have the kitchen prepare another one immediately," Ilara said calmly. "Immediately? The customer has been waiting. You are incompetent. This is what I get for trying to give a chance to someone from the gutter. I knew it the moment I saw you. You can put a uniform on a stray dog, but it's still a stray." The dining room had gone silent. Forks were frozen halfway to mouths. All eyes were on them. Mr. Sterling, the critic, put down his pen and watched with keen interest. Ilara's face was a blank canvas. "That is uncalled for." "Uncalled for." Julian's voice rose, no longer a hiss but a declaration. "I'll tell you what's uncalled for. It's you bringing your filth into my establishment. Look at this dessert. It's flawed. It's imperfect. Just like you. You are a stain on my brand, a blemish on the face of Aura." He was performing now, playing to the audience of his wealthy patrons, reinforcing his image as a gatekeeper of perfection. He snatched the dessert from her tray. "This is what we do with imperfection here," he snarled, and with a dramatic flourish he strode over to a nearby waste receptacle and scraped the entire dessert into the trash. The clatter of the plate against the metal bin echoed in the dead silence. He turned back to Ilara, his eyes blazing with a triumphant, cruel light. "You are fired," he announced, his voice ringing with finality. "Get your things and get out of my restaurant. I never want to see your face again. People like you don't belong in a place like this." He stood there, chest puffed out, expecting her to burst into tears, to beg, to scurry away in shame. He had asserted his dominance, purified his temple. He glanced over at Mr. Sterling, hoping the critic had been impressed by his unwavering commitment to standards. But Ilara did none of the things he expected. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply stood there for a long moment, the entire room's attention fixed on her. Then she did something no one could have anticipated. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a thin, sharp, chilling smile that did not reach her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice clear and carrying, devoid of any fear or shame. "You've been most illuminating." She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the empty tray in her hands. Then, with a poise that stunned the entire room, she turned and walked, not towards the staff exit, but towards the main entrance, her back straight, her head held high. The patrons parted for her as if she were royalty, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Julian Croft stood dumbfounded, the echo of her quiet dignity ringing in his ears. He had meant to humiliate her, to crush her. Instead, he felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, a dawning sense that he had just made a catastrophic mistake. He had picked a fight, not with a stray, but with a sleeping tiger. And he had just pulled its tail. The heavy oak door of Aura swung shut behind Ilara, muffling the stunned silence of the dining room. The cool night air was a welcome balm on her skin. She didn't walk towards the bus stop as Julian Croft might have imagined. Instead, she rounded the corner and stopped beside a sleek black sedan parked in a private spot. The driver, a man with the discreet bearing of a former Special Forces operative, immediately exited the car and opened the rear door for her. "Everything all right, Ms. Vance?" he asked, his tone respectful. "Everything is proceeding as planned, Robert," she replied, sliding onto the plush leather seat. The interior of the car was a world away from Aura. It was quiet, luxurious, and functional. Ilara pulled her phone from a hidden pocket in her worn jeans. She pressed a single number on her speed dial. It was answered on the first ring. "Harrison," a crisp, professional voice said. "It's done," Ilara stated, her voice now stripped of any waitress-like deference. It was the voice of a CEO, cool, decisive, and utterly in command. "The final assessment of Julian Croft is complete. He is arrogant, abusive to his staff, and his business is a house of cards built on a foundation of debt and delusion. His character is fundamentally incompatible with the values of Vance Holdings." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "So the acquisition is off?" Mr. Harrison, her chief legal counsel, asked. "Oh, it's off," Ilara confirmed, a dangerous edge to her voice. "But I'm not just going to kill the deal, Harrison. Mr. Croft gave a rather public performance tonight. I believe it deserves an equally public finale. He wanted to make an example of me. Now I'm going to make an example of him." "What do you have in mind, Ms. Vance?" "He insulted my clothes. He called me filth. He threw away a $10 dessert like it was a grand gesture of power. He seems to be a man who understands theatricality. Let's give him a show he'll never forget. Have the final contract drawn up, the one he's been so desperate for. Use the premium paper, the embossed letterhead, everything. Have it messengered to my penthouse, and clear my schedule for tomorrow at noon. We're going back to Aura." "Back to the restaurant?" Harrison sounded surprised. "Yes, but not through the staff entrance this time." She looked out the window as the car pulled smoothly into traffic, the glittering lights of the city blurring past. She thought of Maria's tired, kind face, of the fear in the busboy's eyes, of the systemic cruelty Julian Croft wielded as a management tool. This was no longer just about a business deal, it was about justice. She spent the rest of the night in her sprawling penthouse apartment, a minimalist space of glass and steel overlooking the entire city. She shed the thrift store clothes like a snake shedding its skin. After a long, hot shower, she stood before her walk-in closet, a vast room filled with bespoke suits, designer dresses, and shoes that cost more than a month's rent at most apartments. She didn't choose any of them. Instead, she went to a small, unassuming wooden chest in the corner. Inside was the first suit her grandfather had ever bought her, a simple, classic charcoal grey wool suit. He'd given it to her when she first joined the company. "Never forget, Ilara," he had told her, his voice raspy with age but firm with conviction, "that clothes don't make the woman. Character does. But sometimes you have to wear the right clothes to remind people of the character they're dealing with." The next morning, she was a different person. The quiet, unassuming waitress was gone. In her place was Ilara Vance, CEO of Vance Holdings. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. Her makeup was subtle but flawless. The charcoal suit fit her perfectly, its sharp lines conveying an aura of untouchable authority. She wore a simple string of pearls and a watch that was a marvel of Swiss engineering. Its quiet ticking a counterpoint to the storm that was about to break. Mr. Harrison met her in the lobby of her building, a sleek leather briefcase in his hand. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a mind like a steel trap. He'd been her grandfather's most trusted advisor, and now he was hers. He looked at her and nodded in approval. "You look formidable, Ms. Vance." "Good," she said. "Today I need to be." In his briefcase was the contract, a multi-page document bound in a deep blue folder detailing the $1 million acquisition of Aura by Vance Holdings. It was everything Julian Croft had ever dreamed of. It was his salvation, his validation, his ticket to the life he so desperately craved. And it was a lie. As they rode in the back of the sedan towards the restaurant, Ilara was silent, her gaze fixed on the city streets. She was calm, but it was the calm of a deep, cold sea before a tsunami. She was about to bankrupt a man, to dismantle his life's work with a single gesture. She felt no pity. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her humility for poverty. He had judged the book by its cover, and he was about to find that the story inside was one he never should have started. The car didn't pull up to the side entrance. Robert drove it right up to the front doors of Aura, parking in the red zone reserved for valet. It was 11:55 a.m. The lunch service was about to begin. The appearance of the gleaming black sedan at the front entrance of Aura caused an immediate stir. Valets, accustomed to a certain level of luxury, recognized the vehicle as something beyond their usual clientele. It was a custom Maybach, a car that whispered of old money and serious power. When Robert, the driver, stepped out, his imposing presence and earpiece signaling high-level security, the restaurant's manager, Gregory, came scurrying out. Gregory was a man cut from the same cloth as Julian, obsequious to power and cruel to those beneath him. "Sir, this is a no-parking zone," he began, his voice a mixture of authority and nervousness. Robert simply ignored him, moving to open the rear passenger door. The first person to step out was Mr. Harrison. His expensive conservative suit and the weight of his leather briefcase immediately marked him as a man of importance. Gregory's tone shifted instantly. "My apologies, sir. Welcome to Aura. Do you have a reservation?" Harrison didn't answer. He simply stood aside, his attention on the car. And then Elara Vance emerged. The transformation was so absolute that for a moment Gregory didn't recognize her. He saw a woman of immense poise and power. The simple, elegant suit she wore cost more than his car. The pearls at her neck were real, and the watch on her wrist was a quiet statement of immense wealth. She moved with an unhurried grace that commanded attention. It was only when her cool grey eyes met his that the dawning horror began to register on his face. He saw a flicker of the girl from the night before, but it was like seeing a photograph of a house and then standing before the mansion itself. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "We're here to see Mr. Croft," Elara said, her voice the same steady tone she'd used when taking a drink order. Yet now it was laced with steel. "I believe he's expecting us." She didn't wait for an answer. She swept past the stunned manager, Harrison falling into step just behind her. The hostess at the front desk, a young woman who had watched last night's humiliation with wide eyes, simply stared, her professional smile frozen on her face. Elara walked into the center of the dining room. The lunch crowd was sparse, the calm before the storm. A few early patrons looked up, their conversations faltering at the sight of this power couple striding through the restaurant as if they owned it. Which Elara thought with a grim sense of irony was precisely what Julian thought she was here to do. Julian was in his small glass-walled office overlooking the dining room, barking into his phone at a supplier. He saw the commotion and his eyes narrowed. He saw Harrison first, recognizing him from a preliminary video conference call weeks ago. The lawyer from Vance Holdings. A jolt of pure, unadulterated joy shot through him. They were here. They were here to sign. He ended the call abruptly and burst out of his office, his face wreathed in his most charming, insincere smile. "Mr. Harrison, what an unexpected pleasure. Welcome, welcome to Aura." He strode towards them, hand outstretched. It was only then that he saw the woman standing beside the lawyer. His smile faltered. His brain struggled to reconcile the image of the powerful, elegant woman before him with the memory of the downtrodden waitress he had fired less than 12 hours ago. The suit, the pearls, the unwavering confidence in her eyes. It couldn't be. "You," he breathed, his hand falling to his side. "What are you doing here? I told you to get out. Are you insane? Calling a lawyer to sue me for wrongful termination? You'll be laughed out of court." Elara didn't even blink. "Hello, Julian," she said, using his first name with a familiarity that made him flinch. "We haven't been properly introduced. I am Elara Vance." The name hung in the air. Vance. He looked from her to the lawyer, to the briefcase, his mind frantically trying to connect the dots. Vance, Vance Holdings. No, it was impossible. A trick. "That's not funny," he stammered. "What kind of scam are you trying to pull?" Mr. Harrison stepped forward. "There is no scam, Mr. Croft. This is Ms. Elara Vance, the founder and CEO of Vance Holdings. She is the sole signatory on all major acquisitions." She has been conducting the final phase of your company's due diligence personally." The blood drained from Julian's face. The color of his expensive tie was suddenly more vibrant than his skin. He looked at Elara, truly seeing her for the first time, the quiet competence, the unnerving calm, the way she had refused to break under his torment. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, stomach-churning certainty. He had spent weeks preparing for the visit from Vance Holdings. He had deep-cleaned the restaurant, drilled the staff, curated the perfect menu. He had been trying to impress the titan of industry, the faceless power behind the money. All the while, she had been standing right in front of him, clearing his tables, enduring his insults, wearing a cheap t-shirt. "No," he whispered. It was a plea. "No, you can't be." "I can," Elara said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "And I am. For the past 2 days, I have been a guest in your house, so to speak. I've seen the real aura. Not the performance you put on for critics and investors, but the truth. I've seen your leadership. I've seen your character. Or rather," she added, her eyes like chips of ice, "the profound lack of it." Julian's legs felt weak. He wanted to collapse. The $1 million deal, his escape from the crushing weight of his debts. It was all slipping through his fingers. He had to fix this. He had to salvage it. "Ms. Vance," he began, his voice a desperate, sycophantic croak. "I am so sorry. It was a misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible mistake. I was under a lot of pressure. The critic, the deal. I wasn't myself. It was a test. Yes, a test of your character. And you passed. With flying colors." The lie was so pathetic, so transparent, that even Gregory, who was hovering nearby, winced. Elara's lips curved into that same chilling smile from the night before. "A test, Julian. Let's be clear. You weren't testing me. I was testing you. And you failed. Spectacularly." Harrison placed the briefcase on a nearby table, the clicks of the latches echoing in the silent room. He opened it and produced the contract, its pages thick and important-looking. He slid it across the polished wood towards Julian. For a wild, hopeful second, Julian thought he had done it. That his groveling had worked. He reached for the document, his hand trembling. This was it. His salvation. "You wanted this deal, didn't you?" Elara's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it cut through the air like a razor. "You were so desperate for this $1 million that you were willing to abuse your staff, to create an environment of fear and misery, to humiliate a woman you thought had nothing, all for the sake of an image." She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a slim, elegant silver lighter. With a flick of her thumb, a steady, hot flame bloomed at its tip. Julian stared at the flame, then at her face. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a dawning, abject terror. "What are you doing?" "You told me you discard imperfection," Elara said, her voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. She picked up the contract, the beautiful embossed document that represented all his hopes and dreams. "I find your entire operation to be flawed." And then, right there in the middle of his pristine dining room, in front of his staff and patrons, she lowered the flame to the corner of the contract. The paper caught instantly. A small, hungry flame licked at the corner of the cover page, curling the expensive cardstock inwards and turning it black. The fire spread with surprising speed, consuming the embossed logo of Vance Holdings, then the bold letters spelling out "Acquisition Agreement." Julian Croft could only watch, paralyzed. It felt like the fire was consuming him, burning away his future, his dreams, his carefully constructed facade. A strangled noise escaped his throat, a sound of pure agony. "No, please, stop. That's $1 million. "It's not $1 million, Elara corrected him, her voice calm and even as she held the burning document. "It's just paper. The money, the real value, was contingent on one thing, my signature. And I would never, ever attach my name or my family's name to a man like you." She held the contract until the flames grew too close to her fingers. Then, with a deliberate, almost ceremonial gesture, she dropped it onto a heavy silver serving platter that a terrified waiter had left on a nearby table. The fire flared up, a brilliant orange pyre in the center of the room. The heat washed over Julian's face. He could smell the acrid smoke, the scent of his own ruin. The staff had emerged from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. Maria stood near the back, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something that looked like awe. The few patrons in the restaurant were on their feet, their phones out, recording the entire unbelievable scene. The contract burned down to a pile of grey, fluttering ash. A few charred scraps of paper, with fragments of legal clauses still visible, were all that remained of Julian's salvation. Ilara looked from the ashes back to Julian. His face was a wreck of disbelief and despair. His tailored suit seemed to hang off him, his posture completely broken. He looked like a puppet with its strings cut. "You publicly humiliated me for an imagined imperfection," she said, her voice resonating in the now silent room. "You called me filth and told me I didn't belong. You judged me on my clothes, on a fiction you created in your own mind. You never once considered the person, only the appearance. That is your fatal flaw, Julian. Not a cracked sugar dome, but a rotten core." She took a step closer to him, forcing him to meet her gaze. He flinched as if she had struck him. "Vance Holdings was your last hope," she continued, her voice dropping to a low, devastating whisper. "I've seen your books. I know about the loans you can't pay, the suppliers you've been stringing along for months. This restaurant is a ghost. It's been dead for a year. It just didn't know it yet. That $1 million deal wasn't an investment. It was life support." She let the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final killing blow. "The deal is off, Mr. Croft." She looked at the smouldering ashes on the silver platter, then back at his shattered face. "You're bankrupt." The words struck him with a physical force. He staggered back, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been shot. The bravado, the arrogance, the cruelty, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified man. He sank to his knees on the marble floor, his eyes fixed on the ashes, mumbling, "No, no, no." Ilara watched him for a moment, not with pity, but with a cold sense of finality. This was the consequence of his choices. This was the bill for his cruelty, come due at last. She then turned her attention away from the broken man on the floor and addressed the assembled staff. Her voice, which had been so sharp and cold, softened. "To the staff of Aura," she said, her gaze sweeping over their stunned faces, "I know what it has been like to work here. I've seen it. I've lived it. Your hard work, your professionalism, and your decency in the face of this man's tyranny has not gone unnoticed." She looked directly at Maria, who was now openly weeping, tears of shock and relief streaming down her face. "Maria," Ilara said, a genuine warmth in her voice for the first time, "you showed me kindness when you had no reason to. You are a true professional. As are many of you." She paused, letting her next words sink in. "Vance Holdings is opening a new 5-star hotel and restaurant complex downtown in 6 months. I am personally inviting every single one of you right now to come and work for us. You will be paid a fair wage, you will be given benefits, and you will be treated with the respect and dignity that you deserve. My assistant will be in touch. No one here needs to worry about their future because of this man's failure." A wave of gasps and murmurs went through the staff. It was a lifeline they had never dared to dream of. Maria could only nod, her face overwhelmed with emotion. With that, Ilara's work was done. She gave a curt nod to Mr. Harrison, who closed his now empty briefcase with a final definitive snap. She turned her back on the wreckage of Julian Croft's life and walked towards the door, her posture as straight and unyielding as ever. As she passed the table where the food critic, Mr. Sterling, was sitting, he looked up at her, his expression one of profound respect. "Ms. Vance," he said quietly, "that was the most fascinating thing I have ever witnessed in a restaurant." Ilara paused and gave him a small, knowing smile. "I hope you'll have a more pleasant dining experience at our new establishment, Mr. Sterling. The atmosphere will be much improved." Then she was gone, leaving behind a room filled with the ashes of a contract, the ruin of a tyrant, and the first fragile shoots of hope for those he had tormented. The weeks that followed the incident at Aura were a quiet storm of legal and financial activity. As Ilara had predicted, without the Vance Holdings acquisition, Julian Croft's empire crumbled overnight. His creditors, who had been holding off in anticipation of the deal, descended like vultures. The restaurant closed its doors within a week, a for lease sign appearing in the window like a tombstone. The news of Julian's spectacular downfall, fueled by the viral videos taken by the patrons, became a cautionary tale whispered in the city's elite circles about the dangers of hubris. Ilara paid it little mind. She had already moved on. Her days were a whirlwind of meetings, blueprints, and strategic planning for the new hotel complex. She personally interviewed every single employee from Aura who applied for a position. From Maria down to the young busboy who had inadvertently triggered the final confrontation. She hired Maria as the head of service for the new flagship restaurant, a position that came with a salary that would allow her to finally retire in comfort when she chose to. She saw the weariness in the older woman's eyes replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and pride. She ensured the busboy was enrolled in a company-sponsored management training program. She wasn't just offering them jobs, she was investing in their futures, a stark contrast to Julian's philosophy of treating people as disposable assets. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a month after Aura had closed, Ilara found herself with a rare free hour. She didn't go to a spa or a high-end boutique. Instead, she changed out of her business attire and into a familiar pair of faded jeans and a soft, worn flannel shirt. She drove her own car, a practical and unassuming SUV, to the outskirts of the city, to the animal shelter. The moment she stepped out, the air was filled with the happy, chaotic sound of barking dogs. The scent of hay and clean animals was a welcome antidote to the sterile environments she usually inhabited. A scruffy terrier mix with one floppy ear recognized her immediately and began wagging its entire body in greeting. She spent the next 2 hours in blissful anonymity. She wasn't Ms. Vance, the formidable CEO. She was just Ilara, the woman who was good at calming anxious dogs and didn't mind getting her hands dirty cleaning out kennels. She sat on the concrete floor, allowing a litter of puppies to crawl all over her, their tiny sharp teeth nibbling harmlessly on her fingers. This was her sanctuary. This was where she reconnected with the values her grandfather had instilled in her. That true worth had nothing to do with money or status, but with compassion, integrity, and the quiet dignity of a job well done. It was why she'd started volunteering in the first place, to stay grounded, to never become like the Julian Crofts of the world. As she was getting ready to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Harrison. It was a link to a news article. The headline read, "Disgraced restaurateur Julian Croft files for personal bankruptcy, cites hostile business environment." The article detailed his complete financial ruin. He had lost everything: the restaurant, his apartment, his fancy car. The last line mentioned that he had recently been seen applying for a job as a line cook at a chain restaurant in a suburban mall. Ilara read the words without a shred of triumph or satisfaction. She felt only a quiet sense of closure. It was the natural, inevitable conclusion to his story. He had built his life on a foundation of sand, and she had simply been the tide. She put her phone away and looked at the hopeful, trusting faces of the animals around her. She picked up a leash and clipped it to the collar of the scruffy terrier with the floppy ear. "Come on, buddy," she said softly, scratching him behind the ears. "Let's go for a walk." Stepping out into the late afternoon sun, with the happy dog trotting eagerly beside her, Ilara Vance felt a profound sense of peace. She had torn down a house built on cruelty, and in its place she was building an institution founded on respect. The ashes of Julian Croft's contract were long gone, swept away by the wind. But the foundations of what she was building now, brick by brick, person by person, were solid rock. And they were made to last. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Meridian, Vance Holdings' new flagship hotel, was the most anticipated event of the year. The building itself was a marvel of modern architecture, a sleek tower of glass and steel that redefined the city's skyline. But it was the restaurant on the top floor, named Haven, that generated the most buzz. Ilara stood discreetly near the entrance, not in the spotlight, but observing. She wore a simple, elegant navy blue dress, content to be a background figure in her own triumph. The room was filled with the city's most influential people, including the food critic, Mr. Sterling. The atmosphere was nothing like Aura. It was warm, vibrant, and alive. The sound of conversation and laughter mingled with the soft notes of a live jazz trio. There was no oppressive silence, no sense of walking on eggshells. She watched her team work. They moved with an efficiency and grace that came not from fear, but from confidence and pride. Maria, looking 10 years younger in her perfectly tailored manager's uniform, commanded the floor with a warm authority, guiding her staff, greeting guests, ensuring every detail was perfect. The former busboy from Aura, now a junior floor manager, confidently instructed a new waiter on the wine service. They were a team, not a collection of terrified servants. They smiled. They helped one another. They treated the guests with a genuine warmth that could never be faked. This was the culture she had fought for. Mr. Sterling approached her, a glass of champagne in his hand. "An incredible achievement, Ms. Vance," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "I've been to 1,000 openings. This one feels different. There's a soul to this place." "That's the highest compliment you could pay us, Mr. Sterling," Ilara replied. "We believe hospitality should come from the heart, not the rule book." "I think I know what you mean," he said with a knowing smile. "By the way, I wrote my review of Aura. It was published the day after it closed. It was not favorable. I didn't mention the fire, of course. I didn't have to. The coldness of the place, the fear in the staff's eyes. It was all there. You can't fake a soul." Later that evening, after the last of the guests had departed, Ilara walked through the quiet dining room. She found Maria standing by the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city below. "We did it, Maria," Ilara said softly. Maria turned, her eyes glistening with tears. "No, Ms. Vance. You did it. You gave us all a second chance. You gave us a place where we can be proud of our work." She hesitated, then said, "I saw him, you know. Julian, a few weeks ago. He was serving fries at a food court. He didn't see me. He just looked empty." Ilara nodded slowly. She thought of the two paths that had diverged so dramatically, one built on arrogance, leading to an empty life in a food court. The other built on respect, leading to this beautiful room filled with purpose, high above the city. "Some people build their worlds out of mirrors, Maria," Ilara said, coming to stand beside her at the window. "They spend all their time polishing the reflection, but there's nothing inside. We're building our world out of windows, so we can see the people around us, and they can see us." They stood in comfortable silence for a long time, two women from vastly different worlds, now united in a shared purpose. Below them, the city lights twinkled like a million fallen stars. It was a new beginning, born from the ashes of an old, broken world, and for the first time in a very long time, everything felt perfectly and truly in its right place.